Facebook issue. Give me 1 second.
Just wait a second.
Going live now.
Hey there, good morning everyone. Welcome back to Bold TV. I'm Carrie Sheffield here with my guest host today. She's a friend of the show, familiar face. Welcome Emily Ann Epstein. She's the executive news editor for Bustle.com, a site for millennial women that covers everything from beauty and pets to books and politics. Good morning, Emily. We're thrilled to have you.
I'm so happy to be here.
And thank you all for joining us. Don't forget to like Bold TV on Facebook. Also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat. And if you love Bold, or if you disagree and you hate the show, but you have strong feelings and you want to get them out there, make sure to share the conversation with your friends.
And remember, we want to hear from you guys. So make sure to add your questions and comments during the show so we can talk about them.
we get great questions and comments, and we feed them to our guests. They really help enrich the perspective. So please, please keep them coming. We will feed them to our amazing lineup today. But before we get to our lineup, let's just run through a few headlines here, Emily.
Yeah, a lot's been happening this week.
A lot just, I mean, as usual, it's just never a dull moment. And we just heard overnight in London, there was another terrorist attack, 22 injured, an apparent bomb or improvised explosive device, an IED, was placed on a subway, and just another instance of apparently terrorism.
Yeah, I was reading the updates as I came over here today, and it looks like the device was actually meant to cause a lot more damage. And the fact that there haven't been any reported deaths yet is actually a real boon. It could have been so much worse, especially during rush hour. London has notoriously packed trains. This was a real tragedy averted.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes you wonder, are they going to take measures to screen people more? Because it seems to be a real problem. I know here in New York, where we shoot our show, they don't screen you to get on a subway at all.
Of course not. I mean, that's such a huge challenge. How many millions of people ride the subway every day? And they place their, their lives in the hands of the MTA every single day to get to work.
Yeah, I mean, it's miraculous, I think. We had the director of the 9/11 Museum on last week. I mean, it's amazing how safe our city is so far. But, I mean, our thoughts and our hearts are definitely with London right now. And we had a tweet from President Trump. Well, let's put that up and look at it, because I want to get your thoughts on this, Emily. So President Trump said, "We have made more progress in the last 9 months against ISIS than the Obama administration has in 8 years. You must be proactive and nasty." So that was in a series of tweets that Trump said in reaction to London, where he was saying that apparently this attack had been on Scotland Yard's radar, but they didn't do enough. Scotland Yard said, "This isn't helpful, President Trump."
But they called him out for speculation, saying that they haven't announced any specific links to ISIS yet, and that, maybe he's putting people in danger by, jumping the gun.
But when he said about ISIS, and the tweet about ISIS, if we can put that back up again, where he said, "We've made more progress," I will give him that we retook Mosul. That was a huge victory to drive ISIS out. Lots of parts of Syria have been, in Iraq. We're making good strides against ISIS. So I give him that. But when he used the word nasty, that jumped out to me. And I know, Bustle, you guys look a lot at Hillary. And I was like, there's that word again, nasty. So, I mean, is he silently saying that basically Hillary would have been good against ISIS?
I mean, I definitely think that Hillary is on his mind. He's been tweeting a lot about her. Her book just came out this week. But I actually think it's a much more shrewd move. The same way he co-opted the language of the left by taking fake news and making it an insult, maybe he's going to take over nasty. Are people no longer going to be able to say, "I'm a nasty woman"? Because if Trump's using it all the time, does it lose its cachet with the left?
I mean, there's no doubt President Trump is a master of pop culture. So, and that's whatever you feel about him. I mean, yeah, it's just fascinating. So we'll see what happens. But let's turn to another story here. And I know Bustle's been doing some reporting on it, of a tragic story of an 8-year-old boy who was almost lynched in New Hampshire. Apparently he was hanged by a group of teenagers, but he survived with just rope burns on his neck. And the incident is not being investigated as a racially motivated crime. There is a GoFundMe page. They're $5,000 away from reaching their goal. What have you guys found in your reporting at Bustle?
I think initially the police were saying, "Oh, we can't tell you that much because since only minors were involved, there are state laws that protect minors, both those who commit crimes and those who are victims of crimes." So they couldn't really tell the media what was going on. But because of the climate in our country today, when you read a headline that an 8-year-old was hanged by a bunch of teenagers, you can't really sit and wait for justice to take its course, however slow that may be. People wanted answers. They wanted to understand how on earth this could happen. And the police have, basically said that they can't really say anything because it's been so difficult to ascertain what even happened because only children saw it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's just really a case study of the importance of making sure that we teach children at a very young age to love each other. And that's something that as a culture we can all do better on.
Certainly.
So let's turn to one final topic and then we'll bring in our first guest. But so this week, as you probably were following, and by the way, I want to give a shout out to Kathleen Klein. She says, "Good morning from Seattle. Hey, Kathleen, great to see you. Rondalee Deschamps says, good morning. Hey, Rondalee.
Good morning.
Great to have you. So the Democrats are saying that they want to work with President Trump.
Shocking.
Which
Very
was,
shocking.
Yeah, the big story of the week. And I know, Bustle, you guys have been reporting on that too, on the debt ceiling deal and how President Trump got, he worked with Chuck and Nancy, as he calls them.
His buddies.
His new friends.
Yeah.
And Bustle's been doing reporting on that and how he tied the debt ceiling increase to hurricane relief.
Yeah.
What have you guys been hearing at Bustle?
Well, our senior political correspondent, Aaron Delmore, reached out to several political correspondents, and really they gave him credit for making sure that, the hurricane relief didn't get bogged up in some sort of bipartisan squabbling. He definitely didn't want to have to blackmail the Democrats basically into pushing this through. And he surprised his own party. He surprised Paul Ryan, got egg on his face here because he said that there would be no deal. And then Trump turned around and made a deal. So it was a really shocking move, I think. And maybe, Trump is becoming less of the deal maker, more of the mediator. Is he going to be the one that, brings the Democrats and the Republicans together? I think this deal and how well it's been received might be an indicator of that.
Well, I will say, as a big fan of Paul Ryan, I didn't think he had egg on his face. And Mitch McConnell said as much as well, because they both moved this bill through. And what they said was the bill actually puts in extraordinary measures that allows them to continue. They don't have, the debt ceiling deal was supposed to be only through December, but under the extraordinary measures that were passed that Mitch McConnell put through, he said this is actually what we wanted too. So in that sense, it was kind of a win-win.
After the fact.
Fair enough. That's
Fair
fair
enough.
enough, Emily. Great.
Well, now we'd like to welcome Erica Jedynak, the state spokeswoman for the Generation Opportunity Institute. Welcome, Erica.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you. So, Erica, you're here to talk about pension reform in New Jersey, which is a topic that I'm passionate about. And we brought a clip from you guys that explains the issue. Let's take a look.
The baby is crying because there will be fewer good jobs for her in the future. The woman is upset about future funding cuts to her local school. The man is angry because his home value will plummet and higher taxes will devour his savings. Think it won't happen to you? Think again. This baby, that mother, this man, and you will all suffer if New Jersey does not solve its pension crisis. Our state owes $235 billion in pension payments. You and your children will have to pay this debt through higher taxes or major cuts to government services. If we don't act now, we all lose.
So,
Erica, can you tell us a little bit more about this issue? I mean, Carrie knows a lot, but I don't. Why is this important? Why now?
Yeah, so for the whole state of New Jersey, $235 billion is a lot, and a state can't go bankrupt. It actually legally cannot go bankrupt. So something's going to have to happen, and the first pension fund goes broke in just 4 years. So one gubernatorial election away, and state taxpayers have to pay the difference. There's going to be massive cuts to public safety, schools. So this is a really big deal.
Wow. And your organization is trying to raise awareness about this. What have been the biggest obstacles for you? Like, the video is very compelling, but can people talk about this? How do they address it? $235 billion is just so big. I can't even, imagine that. How do you talk about that at dinner?
It's kind of a monster, right? And I don't think people necessarily even think about public pensions because a lot of us have 401ks or some other type IRAs, right? And unfortunately, the state's on the hook. All the taxpayers are on the hook for this. So how we can talk about it is we can bring in independent arbitrators to negotiate reform, and we look forward to doing that in the future.
Wow.
and you mentioned 401k. I know that is a big problem with a lot of the pensions because what they do, it seems like they are really more on the old school version of defined contribution. Can you tell us the difference, for all our viewers, what's the difference between defined contribution versus defined benefit plan?
Yeah, so very plain English. A defined contribution plan is like a 401k. So what the private sector offers for people, you put in some money, your employer might match it, put in some money, and you save, it gets interest, and hopefully you have enough for retirement, right? And the defined benefit plan, you're guaranteed a certain amount. So no matter what goes in, you're guaranteed a certain amount. And unfortunately, with things like the recession or the state not paying its share, The fund is in really bad shape. It's about under 40%. It's the worst in the entire country.
My goodness. So who made these deals that, now that you're talking about them, clearly seem so bad for the people of New Jersey and the government of New Jersey? Who's benefiting from this?
So I don't think people are necessarily benefiting from it, other than it's past governors, Republican and Democrats, who have not put in enough money because they've wanted the funding to go to their own pet programs, right? It's almost like you can kick the can down the road. Unfortunately, people are expecting their retirement, and millennials, I don't think we can expect a pension, let alone young people are not going to be staying in a job that long to get a pension.
And what role do the public sector unions play in this? Because a friend of mine has done a lot of research on this in terms of a lot of them are pushing back against moving from, so currently the state's on defined benefit and private sector is mostly on defined contribution, and a lot of public sector unions are opposed to that change. Talk about their role.
Yeah, so right now, politically, they're the number one obstacle as far as getting some kind of reform put through. And I would say, particularly with the teachers union, it's not teachers, it's the union leadership who are making, $400,000, $500,000 a year, right? They're actually lying to their members about the state of affairs. I think we can come to some compromise in the future, and I think it's possible.
And what would that compromise look like? Because you do have a Republican governor and you have a Democratic legislature. Is that part of the disconnect here where these parties, we just talked about on Capitol Hill where we saw Donald and Chuck and Nancy doing a bipartisan thing here. Do you think we could see something in New Jersey where there would be some reforms?
So in the future, yes. Governor Christie is out by January. We're going to get a new governor no matter what. So there's going to be an opportunity for new leadership to come to the table. It's really imperative for all the stakeholders, whether it's union leaders, workers, teachers, the elected officials, to all come to the table.
Interesting. And has there ever been a pension reform in the states that, can serve as an example of like a way New Jersey can move forward? Like, where has this, because I'm sure lots of states have faced this issue, and how did they solve it?
Yeah, well, most recently, Arizona actually put forth reform, and experts that are also willing to come into New Jersey, they led, I want to say, over 200 roundtable meetings to actually get everyone together, because this is not simple. We won't say that it's simple, but it is very doable. So everyone came forth with what they wanted, and then actuaries did the fiscal modeling for it. So let's all look at the rational basis, right? Let's look at the numbers, see what we can do. And there's been reform in Michigan, most recently Pennsylvania earlier this summer.
Oh, excellent. I know in Rhode Island as well, a Democrat, Gina Raimondo, is someone who has led the way in Rhode Island against her own party. A lot of people were pushing back on her, and she showed a lot of courage. Very bold woman.
Yes, and saving the states.
Yes. Well, and you're a very bold woman, too. Thank you so much for joining us, Erica.
Thank you for having me.
It's been wonderful talking to you.
Great.
Let's move on to our next segment, brought to you by Change.org.
Change.org is the world's largest petition platform and hub for civic organizing. Its mission is to empower individuals everywhere to create the change they want to see in the world. Change.org does this by providing free tools for everyday people to start campaigns, mobilize supporters, and work with decision makers to drive solutions.
Last week, Hurricane Irma hit the Gulf Coast, and we are still assessing the damages. The recovery process will be long, and the victims and survivors still need our help and support. We wanted to set aside this segment to discuss the aftermath.
If you go to change.org, there's a petition on their site which was calling for more media coverage of the Virgin Islands disaster relief efforts. This petition, started by Mary Smith, was successful in reaching its goal of more than 30,000 signatures.
That's a lot of signatures.
Yeah, 30,000
that's a big
signatures.
one.
I mean, and very quickly, too. So, Emily, do you believe the damage done to the Virgin Islands has been overshadowed by what has happened in Texas and Florida in terms of media coverage?
I mean, I think the media, at least when I go to, CNN.com, NewYorkTimes.com, I'm always clicking on the hurricane coverage. But of course, I'm a news editor, so I'm interested in that kind of thing. And I think it was really important and a really bold move for Mary Smith to say, the Virgin Islands are not just another Caribbean island. They're populated by American citizens, and they're going to need special attention because there's a lot less of them to ask for it. And, you know, that's different. There's only, I think, 110,000 people that are there. And that pales in comparison to Texas, and it pales in comparison to Florida. So I think there is a good cause to ask for more attention, and hopefully more aid will come from that.
Sure, and also, yeah, it's kind of the geography thing too, where it's out of sight, out of mind.
Certainly.
If it's not directly in your sight of vision, sometimes things get left behind too. So just so our viewers know, she's a familiar face, Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett, the representative for the Virgin Islands. She's been on with us a couple times. She's there right now. We had reached out to her, and she was going to come on the show, but she ended up having to go to St. Thomas, where the Wi-Fi right now is not that strong. So unfortunately, we could not get her, but we did reach out to her team, and we got some great responses from her team.
Yeah, we asked the Congresswoman her reaction to the Change.org petition, and her team said, this is very helpful. One thing that we will have to do is continue to remind the world that the U.S. Virgin Islands, paradise as it's called, will have a long recovery in terms of getting back to normal. What Change.org is facilitating will only help us keep the people of the U.S. Virgin Islands in the world's thoughts and prayers.
We also asked Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett's team, is there another pressing need related to hurricane relief that another petition on Change.org could help with? What they said was, we will be needing supplies and medicine for now. Down the road, we will also need people who would like to come to the U.S. Virgin Islands to help in rebuilding the effort.
I think that's a great point, but since, again, their population is so small, and they may not necessarily have the skilled workers that can rebuild a hospital, that can remove a tree from, you know, a giant massive destruction. And, you know, any population is going to have struggles doing that, but such a small population, there probably aren't enough people that can do that kind of work.
Sure, and when we had the Congresswoman on before, she was talking about the economy, and it is very tourism driven. There's a lot of rum and a lot of, you know, industries that aren't necessarily, like you said, high skilled. And so they do need help. And so I hope that any of our viewers, if you want an excuse to go to the Virgin Islands,
Yeah.
you've got a great one right now.
Definitely.
So we also asked Congresswoman Plaskett, what charity do you prefer that we work with and donate to? And what they said was the Red Cross has been great. We ask that donations go there if possible. Next, we have local Virgin Islands associations all over the country collecting goods. And lastly, you can go to the Facebook page at USVI Hurricane Irma Alert for more information on where to give. Again, that's USVI Information Alert. Sorry, USVI Hurricane Irma Alert.
Great job. You did
Yes.
it. Yeah.
Let me do that one more time.
One more time. Let's do it.
USVI Hurricane Irma Alert for more information on where to give. And we will help you. We'll do that. And if any of our viewers, if you have any hurricane stories, let us know and we'll talk about them here. And we always like to hear from you all and what you're doing. But let's move on now to our next guests, Justine Lee and Tria Chang. They are hosts of a bipartisan group. They are dinner parties that are called Make America Dinner Again.
These dinners are meant to bring liberals and conservatives together to discuss their views over food. We are so excited to have you on the show. Maybe you can even share some recipes.
We would love to.
So, ladies, welcome to you both. Tell us, how did this get started?
So it got started, actually, the idea came a day after the election. We were really feeling, it became very clear to us that in San Francisco we lived in a bubble, and it's a city where a Trump voter might not feel safe viewing their opinions. And so we really wanted to create a safe space for people of all political ideologies and leanings to come together and be able to share where they're coming from, and also an opportunity for them to hear each other out and hear a side that they might not have been exposed to face to face.
And how did you go about finding these Trump supporters? Since, you know, you said you didn't know them. Did you put a call out on social media? Did you troll Reddit? What did you do?
That's a great question. We kind of did a little bit of everything. So we did reach out to our personal networks and just say, if you are a Trump supporter or know any Trump supporters or conservatives who would like to come to dinner and have a space where it feels safe and comfortable to talk about their views, let us know. So that was kind of the most successful, because I think friends and friends of friends felt a little more comfortable coming to a strange dinner that they've never heard of. But as we get a little more press coverage, we do have some conservatives who are signing up on the website, which is great. We have also used Nextdoor and Facebook and Reddit. I did, personally message a Reddit poster once. I don't think we always have luck with the cold outreach, but a bit of that. We've reached out to some college groups and young Republican clubs as well. So we're kind of trying to do everything we can to get a balanced group around the table.
So I thought, and again, our viewers, if you have any questions or comments about Make America Dinner Again, how would you feel about eating with the Trump supporter, or how would you feel about eating with the Clinton supporter? Let us know. But you both mentioned the word like safe place, and I'm conservative. I actually didn't vote for Trump myself. However, I have a lot of family and friends who did. And I traditionally have every presidential election I have voted in, except I voted for a Republican. And I wrote in a Republican just as a protest candidate. So, but when I hear the phrase safe space, to me, that actually sounds like a very liberal phrase to say that this is a place where you guys are creating a conversation where you actually want people to be challenged. And it's not necessarily safe in the traditional sense of I'm gonna plug my ears and I'm not gonna listen to anything that doesn't jive 100% with my beliefs. Do you think that progressives have been so unwilling to be challenged intellectually and just culturally by people who are not like them?
I think that's a great question and a great point because, safe space can have a connotation that's very icky for some people. So let's pretend we didn't say that.
It's a safe space for you to say it on the show.
Exactly. But I think when we say safe, we more mean that it's safe in that you won't be vilified for what you're saying or thinking, and that we actually do set ground rules for our dinners so that, some examples of ground rules
are no interrupting, and
Ooh, that must be hard.
it is challenging for some of our guests, but we actually have Post-its for them and a pen, so if a thought comes across their mind when they're hearing a point of view, they can jot down a note, and we encourage them to do that and bring it up after the person is finished closing their thoughts.
And no accusatory language like you're wrong, more like, okay, from my experience, I've seen something different. But to directly answer your question, I do think that liberals and conservatives alike can be in a space where they just don't want to hear something that threatens their way of life or their ideology. And so we are trying to create sort of an event that feels neutral. You know, we all need to eat and we all love
to
having
eat.
dinner.
So, exactly.
So we try to get people together around that. And
it's really hard to hate someone or to kind of come in with like a lot of anger when you're sitting across the table face to face and you have a delicious meal in front of you. So we found that to be really
So are you saying there have been no food fights?
There's been no food fights.
that would be fun, actually. A food fight maybe would be therapeutic.
Cathartic. Just get out.
Throw me those mashed potatoes.
So we have a viewer question says, what has been the most difficult dinner conversation that you've had so far in this project?
Ooh.
That's a great question.
Yeah, I would say it was probably from our second dinner. Yeah, the topic of race came up, and that's always, it was between a couple of our guests who had different views of the role of racism in our country, and there were some ground rules that were broken and we had to interject. But actually we found that after we kind of took a step back and reminded people of the ground rules, they were able to come to a good place. And
we found race to be particularly difficult to talk about because it is who you are and how you look, and it's very personal for people. So I think most of the time when they're talking about the issues, they can separate it a little bit from who they're talking to, but when it's race, people can feel a bit judged or attacked, and it gets delicate for sure.
Wow.
yeah.
That's a good lesson.
We have a question here also from JT Trollman. Hey, JT. He says, I'm so inspired by Make America Dinner Again. How do people join dinners?
Oh, good question. So they can go to our website, which is makeamericadinneragain.com, and no spaces or punctuation or anything
Nothing
fancy like
fancy.
that.
Yeah.
It's just our name, one word. So we have signups there, and we also actually right now we just launched our GoFundMe campaign. So if folks can't join a dinner, they can't host themselves, they can still contribute and be involved by donating to our campaign.
And we send summaries of the dinners to our donators so they get to hear a little bit about what was talked about.
That sounds delicious.
Yes. So, politics aside, do you have menu requirements? Like, you must have an appetizer and all this? Because I don't cook. Like, microwave? Like, is that like illegal to be microwaving?
Oh, yeah, you don't have to cook. So we take care of the food for our guests.
Ooh, that's a bonus. Yes, that is very good to know.
Free dinner and free
Free
conversation.
dinner, free conversation, because we feel like people give so much just by bringing their stories and being willing to talk to each other and being willing to be honest and respectful and listen. So we don't want to create a barrier by charging a ticket price. That's also why we have the GoFundMe. We were actually paying for all the dinners out of pocket thus far, and then we realized this is not scalable with our income. So yeah, that's why we started our campaign.
Awesome. I love it.
Yeah, I'm getting hungry. Yeah. Can we do like make America lunch again? Yeah. After the show. I think that
please.
could be really fun.
Yeah. No, I'd love to have a bold MATA dinner.
Yeah.
MATA.
Oh, that would be amazing. We're actually talking about having some guest speakers at dinners as well, just to kind of give people talking points. So we'd love to have you guys at dinners in the future.
Yeah, that would be great. Great. Well, thank you so much, ladies.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it. Justine Lee and Tria Chang from Make America Dinner Again. Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now let's move on to our next segment called Ben Franklin Circles. As we introduced last week on the show, this is a nationwide initiative led by the 92nd Street Y, the Hoover Institution, and Citizen University to bring people together to talk about shared values.
Today we're focusing on the virtue of humility and how we can achieve this virtue by working with others, even when they have differing opinions. We want to make these virtues come to life in current events.
So what did Benjamin Franklin say about the virtue of humility? He said that we should imitate Jesus and Socrates. Now, I should note here, we are not here to endorse any religious group, but we do recognize the moral teachings of those historical figures. We'd like to take the time to think of how Franklin's virtue of humility intersects with the discussion of current events.
We're excited to discuss this with Dave Smith and Alexandra DeSanctis. Dave is a libertarian comedian, and his debut comedy special, Libertas, is available now. Alexandra DeSanctis is the William F. Buckley Jr. Fellow from National Review. Welcome to you both. Thank you for joining us.
Hello.
Dave, you're a comedian. Mm-hmm. Do you think about humility in your work?
No, I'm very, very cocky. And I just wanted to also say that my agent lied to me and told me this was a Clay Aiken concert, and I'm very disappointed to be here. I'm just surrounded by intelligent women, okay, which makes me uncomfortable.
Blue. All in
Yes, intelligent women in blue.
I know you're
a
libertarian, so I know you're not used to having women around, but we'll try to.
We are, I will say, our demographics are old-fashioned.
They skew. Whenever I go to a libertarian gathering, the odds are good, but the goods are odd.
Well, I think it's a very interesting subject, and it's very relevant to our times, like the idea of humility. I think comedians are, life in general can be humbling, but comedy, it gives it to you very quickly. So no matter how great a comic is, there's nothing like an immediate response of being like, hey, I think this is really funny, and a crowd going, no, we don't. And you're like, all right, let's move on with that. But I think there's, just like, the thought that comes to my head is where you see, like, we live in this culture where 20-year-olds are ready to start throwing rocks at people because they've got it wrong. And there's like no one going to you like, how are you so convinced you have it right? You're 20. You've been to one poli-sci class. You know what I mean? Like, read a little bit more. But so, I don't know.
But
Anyway,
so how do you handle that as a comedian when the audience is like, oh no, like that's a lot of rejection. I mean, maybe you're just amazing and you never get rejected, but like my sister's a comedian and she says sometimes it's brutal. Like how do you balance humility with a healthy self-respect?
Because the humility thing is, failure is what makes you better. I mean, it's not fun, but you get through it, and that's what makes you, all of us, that's what makes us better. When you do good, it's great, it feels good, but you don't actually learn from it. And when you're humbled, that's when you get better, and you're like, let's make that not happen again.
Do you think humility allows people to listen better? Just kind of like suppressing their pride and, understanding that, even as a comedian, someone who deals with politics, that like listening is an important
Yeah, I think, well, to me, like you said, like I'm a libertarian, like a very hardcore libertarian, and I think that's a very essential part of the philosophy is the idea of humility. The reason why you're like, oh, you're free to live your life the way you want to, and I'm free to live my life, is because I don't know what the right answer is. Like, if I knew what the right answer is, maybe I could force everyone else to live it this way. And the whole idea of freedom of speech is like, we got to talk to come to consensus. We don't, like, I don't know everything and you don't know everything, and we can't, so let's like work this out. So I think that's the whole idea of freedom. Is,
Ben Franklin would be down with that.
Yeah.
But Alexandra, let's bring you into this. And great haircut, by the way. So repeat guest from the show. So I know National Review, it's historically been very prestigious and very much in the in crowd within conservatives and the Republican Party in general. But in 2016, National Review was on the outs. So how was that from like a humility standpoint? How did the magazine react being on the outs?
I mean, I think for us, there was a lot of humility involved. I wasn't at the magazine when we published the Against Trump issue, which is sort of where it all began. I got there last summer, so that would be the summer of 2016. But at that time, it seemed like we were really, we were concerned most importantly about speaking the truth and being a voice for true conservatism in America. And for our editors, that meant not endorsing Trump and saying that Trump is not a true conservative. Trump doesn't represent the things that we believe the American Republican Party should be about. And I think that did take humility, and it took, a willingness to not be popular and a willingness to not be in the in crowd anymore. And I think a lot of people respected us more because of that, even if they didn't agree with us.
You got to say, whatever your feelings are, it was a pretty incredible thing to see the biggest, conservative publication coming out and saying we're not on board with the guy who at the time was clearly going to win, the Republican nominee. Like that's pretty epic. If you follow the history of like right-wing politics, that's a big deal. Like
Certainly, and it's definitely an inversion of the idea that to have humility is to be humble, but it looks like it can also involve being brave. Taking that stand and going against the grain. It seems like it was bold.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that humility really means seeing yourself for what you are. And for National Review, or for me as a journalist, that means, accepting mistakes, but also wanting to speak the truth. And I think that's why National Review did what we did.
We got a viewer comment here from Kathleen Klein. She says, rather than try to convince the other side, we need to just understand what the other person thinks and why. Some issues might never find common ground, but there are many areas where we can agree on, even if we let go of thinking the other side must be wrong or evil. So do you think listening to the other side requires humility, Alexandra?
Certainly, because, humility means that you don't think you have the answer right 100% of the time before you even start thinking about an issue. And, every time I write, there are a lot of things I feel very strongly about, and I feel like I know a lot about, but I'm not going to go writing things without researching more or talking to people. I don't talk to someone who I disagree with before I write every column, but I like to learn from people, and I like to consider that, someone else might have more of the big picture than I do and take that into account, because I think it strengthens my point of view overall to do that.
As mentioned earlier in the show, both Democrats and Republicans worked with the Trump administration to take action to raise the debt ceiling and finance the government until mid-December. Do you think that deal was an exercise in humility? How did that play in? Alexandra, you're twitching.
No, I don't want to keep, hogging the conversation, but
He'll interrupt you when he wants to.
please feel free to.
He'll mansplain.
But I really didn't see much humility in it at all. Regardless of what you think about the substance of the deal, I think it was much more Trump wanting to look like the big winner, and he couldn't get something through with the Republicans, and so he said, whatever, we'll get a deal done. And I don't think it was much of a deal. I think it was more him just saying, okay, we'll do what Democrats want, and oh, look, we're getting good press. Isn't this great? That's what he wants at the end of the day. He wants good press.
Yeah.
He wants people to like him. That's not humility.
Yeah, I agree. I don't see what's humble about or what's demonstrating humility about spending our children into oblivion for present consumption. I think it's like disgusting. I really think it's one of the most disgusting things that we do as a country, like morally reprehensible. We take in with taxes right now over $3 trillion a year. That would put us at, if you want to compare to other governments, spending more than any government in the history of humanity has ever spent. And we say, no, that's not enough. We have to keep spending future prosperity for present consumption. We're not spending this on building for the future. It's a consumer-based economy. And what's the point of having a debt ceiling? What's the point of having it if every 6 months we raise it?
Even if you think it's disgusting, isn't part of humility acknowledging
Sorry, I'm just
that,
taking it away from the topic.
there's nothing wrong with expressing yourself. But I guess the question is, even if you think something is disgusting, or I think a lot of people on the left who were Hillary supporters think, I mean, Hillary herself said that the Trump people were deplorable. Similar word is disgusting. You know, it's just, so at what point how do you draw the line between freedom of expression, but also having empathy and understanding? That's how democracy works, where we can express ourselves without dehumanizing the other side.
I do think we should, there's a difference between me, I'm kind of disgusted by the policy, but I think it's, at least I don't want to go down the road of just saying there are like these huge portions of the American people that are just so horrible. And like, I don't know, like.
So you're saying to separate the policy from the people.
I just think, look at the objective facts. I just look at the objective facts and I go, Americans, if you want to judge them, are like the most charitable, open people in the world. I mean, this is demonstrable. It's not like the left wing kind of makes it out like we're this evil, racist country. And it's like, compared to what? Well, compared to everyone else, we're actually not. We assimilate better than every other country. We take in more immigrants and we give more to charity. That being said, so I don't look at like all of Trump's supporters as just being evil if they don't want open borders. And I also would say, which is a little bit more difficult for me, like everyone on the left is not, a Marxist commie. And I get why a lot of people on the left were convinced that the other group is racist and you don't want to be racist. So I'd say that we should be more, humble about not assuming the worst of other people.
I mean, I want to roll back a little bit when you said that, everyone on the left thinks this. That's not an exercise in humility. You can't paint an entire, population of the country as thinking one thing.
Okay, it's a little bit of a generalization, but I mean, it's so prevalent, I should say. It like permeates the entire left wing.
And just like jumping off of that, I mean, the fact that you criticize a country for maybe not doing the best it can do on race and on discrimination, I mean, are we just supposed to stop progress?
No, I'm fine.
Are we supposed to just be like, well, we're the best in the world, so that's good enough?
No, I'm just saying keep some perspective. If you're sitting here talking about how people are deplorable or talking about, if you're going to say we live in a white supremacist country, which I don't know if you've heard, I've heard thousands and thousands of times this year said by many different people, you just have to have some perspective. Compared to what? Sure, you're right. We're not perfect, and we should always be trying to get better. Believe me, I don't think we should be fighting wars in the Middle East. There's a lot of things we shouldn't be doing that we're doing right now. But it's like to say we're this horrible, racist, evil country, I just don't, there's no sense of proportion or sense of relativity there.
So what you're saying is sense of proportion is a form of humility to understand.
Sure,
your
I think
place
so,
in the
yeah,
world.
yeah.
That's
bring it back to
interesting.
Ben.
Yes, exactly.
Bring it
Back to Ben. So, and Alexandra, one of our viewers, agrees with you. She said, she's right. Humility for the sake of vanity is not being humble. So I know you have strong feelings about President Trump, who I don't think most people would agree is a humble person. And in fact, I think that a lot of people would say that part of why he was elected was because he's the opposite of humble. So what advice would you give to President Trump on this issue of humility? Do you think when has he ever shown humility that you've seen?
There actually was one time recently, I wish I could remember what the issue was. I think it was when he gave the foreign policy speech about our new strategy in Afghanistan. Yeah. And I remember him saying something like, when I was elected, I thought this. I thought we should pull out totally. And then I talked to people and I thought about it more. And today I'm coming to you with a very different picture of what I want to do. And, say what you want about that, whether that strategy was good or not. But that was really the first time that I can think of off the top of my head that he said, I thought X and I changed my mind to Y and I was wrong. Here's why. He just doesn't really do that very often.
It's the only other thing I could think of is the grab them by the place you're not supposed to grab people comment was like the only thing he came out and goes, probably shouldn't have said that. It was like that was the most of an apology you could, because like all this stuff where he'd be like, thousands of Muslims were celebrating and they'd be like, okay, that video does not exist, and he'll just be like, well, lots of people say it.
Or
and
even,
then,
or even
just
videos, there are videos of him saying one thing and then a clip of him saying something else a week later, and he never says, oh yeah, you're right, last week I said this and I changed my mind because of whatever. He never explains himself, he never admits that he even changed his mind. He just kind of flip-flops all over the place.
So, and I know just from all my friends who are Trump supporters, and I have a lot of family members who are Trump supporters, and a lot of them liked the fact that he had this robust perspective, I guess, to put it very charitably. But so is there a way that he could channel that in a positive way to say, I don't have to apologize for America anymore. I don't have to, whatever. And I didn't think he was conservative enough for me either. But whatever you want to say, he was on the Republican team. And a lot of his messaging was to say, hey, you liberal press, we're not going to take it anymore. Like, we're not just going to keep our heads down. And in some respects, be humble in that way. But do you think there's it seems like there's always kind of a dark side to every virtue, where if it's taken too far in one direction, then it's imbalanced?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, Aristotle would say that the virtue is the mean between two extremes. So humility doesn't mean thinking that you're terrible. It means seeing yourself for what you are.
Right.
So I think that's important to keep in mind. And so if Trump could stick to the middle road, absolutely, we shouldn't apologize for America. But he has to kind of stick more to the middle rather than we're always perfect, I never apologize, and we're the worst.
It's amazing to discuss the humility of a man who paints his name on bright gold letters on the side of his building. But yeah. He'll figure it out.
Eventually. Well, thank you guys both for being here, Alexandra DeSanctis and Dave Smith. These virtues are important because they apply to our daily lives in so many ways.
Yes.
Thank you guys.
And anytime you can quote Aristotle, you know that you're on the right track.
Definitely.
Again, the Ben Franklin Circles are an initiative of the 92Y, the Hoover Institution, and Citizen University. Anyone can start one, and you can meet anywhere. For more information, visit benfranklincircles.org, where you can find out detailed instructions about how to launch your own Ben Franklin Circle. So now let's move on to our regular Bookstr segment. As usual, we love having the co-founder of Bookstr, Sarah Hill, with us. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you.
And as you all know, Bookstr is an online community of book lovers. And this week, I am so excited to announce my friend who is joining us. Her name is Eboni K. Williams, and she's the author of Pretty Powerful: Appearance, Substance, and Success. Eboni, welcome.
Thank you, Miss Carrie. Thank you. So glad to be with you.
Quite a
guys.
title.
Thank you. It's a little bit provocative. Yeah, just a touch.
Bold.
Yes, it's very bold. It is absolutely bold, Miss Carrie. You're exactly right. Thank you for having me, ladies.
So tell us about this book. Why did you feel like you had to write it?
So it's interesting. Carrie knows a bit about it because she graciously helped me moderate a virtual signing, which was very cool in my apartment. This was supposed to be called Madam President, and it was supposed to be about Hillary Clinton and all of the women that have ran for the Oval. And my publishers were like, that's fine, we can do that book, but anybody could really write that book. We're actually interested in your story and your personal narrative, and we want to know a bit about how you went from, only child growing up in poverty to a single mother, to being a first-generation college graduate, to being a trial attorney, to then being a broadcaster, all by the age of 30.
And you fit that in a book.
Yes, and a very compact, quick read of a book as well. Travel size.
Everything with excellence.
And yes, and you know what? Thank you for saying that, because one of the we've been having amazing social media response to this book, and someone tweeted out, I don't know what the big to-do and taboo nature of the response of the book is, because of course how you appear matters to your professional ascent, because how you do one thing is how you do everything. And I think that's very, very much true, or certainly that's the perception. So I think that we, particularly as powerful women, get to put ourselves at a huge advantage when we take full advantage of articulating what we want to be conveyed, whether that's authoritative, whether that's competent, whether that's mature, whether that's purposeful, all intentionally in how we present ourselves in a physical attribute.
I have a question for you.
Absolutely.
So you touch on this in the book, and it's something that hit home with me. You talk about how your appearance matters and how you can still dress feminine and be beautiful. I have to tell you, I spent like a year or 2 years dressing like a man. I was just like, I'm wearing pants, like oversized Oxfords, like glasses. And I was like, okay, am I being more effective? I was thinking yesterday, was I being more effective then, or now I'm dressing up and like I wear a dress every day almost, and I can't tell quite the difference. And I thought maybe actually with my investors particularly, I was like, I think that they actually respond better when I'm dressed like with the glasses and the, pants and stuff.
Really?
I don't know. Like, what's your thought on that and advice?
Well, my first thought is I think you look great. And, when we just met right outside the door and you came up, I had no idea, who you were, what your title was, but I'll tell you what I got from you.
Oh, dear.
Nice.
Well, I mean, you asked. Yeah.
Live
I got
evaluation.
that I figured you might own your own business, or you had a very conscious and intentional representation of being like front facing, as we call it in business. Obviously, you're engaging. You had this pearl studs, which told me you had a little air of conservatism, which I can respect being a woman of the South. You have on a dress, but it's got a sleeve. You've got a high neckline, so it's like this is daytime. It's like, we're 10 something in the morning. So I just felt like there was a lot of intentionality when you're wearing red, which is a color that says I'm here, I'm present, I'm here to be noticed and seen.
Got that from Carrie.
Yeah, exactly. So all these little pretty power elements, and I think it's telling that you used to dress kind of, as you say, as a man, because I think for years, generations have told us that that's what we need to do as women to be seen as serious and substantive, that we need to divorce ourselves from our femininity and our sexuality in terms of the way we appear. And by no means, and in this book, and Judge Janine Pirro really says it best, she calls women cockroaches that sleep their way to the top or otherwise try to engage. She's very, very severe.
Those are fighting words.
Yeah, I think she says it like 3 times. Like, they're cockroaches, they're cockroaches, they're cockroaches. Letting it all hang out types. And look, I'm not here to slut shame, right? If that's your jam, then that's your jam. But you have to be aware of the consequences of how that's going to be perceived professionally as well. So I would be interested to see, which way works better per se. I would guarantee you're conveying different things with both of those things. But the thing that you're doing at all times is you're being intentional. And that's really what the book is about. It's not saying it's wear dresses or pants or glasses or ponytails. It's no rules. It's just being intentional and thoughtful around how you curate your brand and your message.
Do you feel that, like you were saying, you basically read her, like she was data, that every single part of her attire had a sort of subliminal message?
Yes.
How did you learn what these subliminal messages were? That, what does red mean versus blue versus pearls versus,
chandeliers,
giant
or
hoops,
absolutely. So again, there's no science, there's no bright line rules, but my perception was formed at an early age. So I started acting and doing pageants at like 5, 6 years old.
She had her first glamour shots at age 6.
Yes, that is true. I had a comp card and everything, and so I had a resume. And so I kind of understood this notion of appearance and product and marketing and branding and messaging, really, is what we're talking about here at age 6, as Carrie points out. And throughout my adolescence and my teenage years, and certainly as a young law student, where my classmates would sleep to their law school exams in sweats because they'd been up all night and they looked a mess. I also was up all night, but I literally went back to my apartment, left the library, took a shower, put on a skirt suit, because I wanted to feel with that exam like I was taking it as a litigator. I wanted to feel and embody and channel that energy of authoritative attorney spirit. So for me, that correlated. That's not the only way you can ace a test, but it did work for me.
What do you think about millennials now, too? Because it seems like in the startup culture in Silicon Valley, it's all about the hoodies, the flip-flops.
Zuckerberg look.
Like what they're trying to say is that, the polish and the jewels and the psychology behind all of that, what are they trying to convey? And do you think that's the way of the future?
I think it's totally acceptable. Yeah, of course. Like I do a lot of mentorship, and that's, in the book, and it's heavy, and I am where I am because people mentored me. So I went to this panel in Harlem, and there were 2 gentlemen, and they were great high ups in Google, and they literally had on the hoodies and the jeans and the sneakers. And it was 10 o'clock in the morning, and I had on my, Fox News dress or whatever, and heels. And the students were like, what's going on? I was like, you know what? We are both accurately reflecting the brands that we represent and our company and their ambassadorship. So you need to know, again, it's not, you got to dress up with 6-inch heels and, lashes. That's not the mandate. It's reflecting the culture. So it's fine to lean into the hoodie culture if that's the tech space and that's their branding. Megan McCain, our mutual friend, talks a lot about when she was in LA, starting as an intern in broadcasting, she was sleeping it and wearing pajamas, as she says, sweats. And then she realized, you know what? In this space, it's not taken as seriously. In this space, it undermines my intentionality. So she made that adjustment. So I think it's important for all people, girls and guys alike, young people, older people, to just assess the space you're trying to occupy and then make intentional decisions around that.
And do you feel that, currently right now with sort of feminism 2.0 and intersectionality, that there's a bit of problematic relationship between how people look and how women look, especially, that, there shouldn't be this much pressure and, activating their own power? How do you become a feminist and manipulate your dress?
I love Activate your own power. I like that phrasing, so thank you for that. So Marcia Clark, and she was my first interview in this book. She was amazing, and as I tell her in the chapter, she was also the first woman I saw try a case in practicing law in real life, outside of like a character on Law and Order or something. So as a young girl that knew I wanted to be an attorney, that was empowering. That was powerful. That was representation showing me that she did it and I could do it too. But Marcia Clark is very much of the mindset that it should not matter. We need to rise above it, although there's kind of this instinctual, almost biological calling upon us as women to be the standard bearers of beauty and aesthetic value. We should still, as a society, push to be better. And I agree with her. But this book is kind of written for in the meantime. While we are still a society that is, I would say, obsessed with the visual and what it looks like, and even more so nowadays, we're live streaming this. People are not just listening to us, they're seeing us. They're seeing you ladies in this beautiful cobalt blue matching here, and it's amazing. And I'm sure they're I guarantee you, I know you guys are friends, but I guarantee you there's commentary around, I wonder if they planned that. I wonder if that was, was someone upset that they showed up and they both, because that's just how obsessed we are with the visual component. And Instagram and Snapchat, and we're more visual today than ever before. So I think if the mandate is to move past it, we're moving in the wrong direction. I think that we're very concerned with it, and I like the fact that we can take our power back by being mindful of that and being intentional, instead of letting other people, men, mainstream media, other women, our environments corporately control what the narrative is around how we appear. This book is written to give us that empowerment, that self-empowerment, to say, you know what, you don't decide what this means, I decide, and I have a very intentional aspect as to how I'm presenting visually and otherwise.
So, Eboni, I know that your book came out at a time that was in your personal career.
Yes.
It was just a lot had been going on.
It was challenging. It was very challenging.
With Charlottesville, and
Yes,
in the news, like with Jamil Hill and what she's been saying from ESPN
Yes.
About President Trump, and but your mom voted for Trump.
Proudly, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, what's that process been like for you? As you've released your book, and then there are voices like Jamil Hill. Like, do you agree with her? I mean, what's your sense of all of this?
I agree with her right to say it. I think just like you ladies and myself, we've earned platforms that allow us to be able to articulate our points of view about issues in a public forum. And with that comes a lot of support and a lot of positives and a lot of scrutiny and criticism and negatives. So I know I've experienced that. I know you've experienced that. I know personally, Carrie, you guys have as well. We all go on Twitter and see all of that, and the good and the bad, right? So that's my feelings on Jamil Hill, and I know Jamil, and she's a talented broadcaster, and I think that she will live and die by what she said. Moving on from that, though, Carrie, I knew that there would be severe consequences to my docket. It was not an off-the-cuff kind of fly remark. That was something I spent all day drafting and editing and thinking very seriously and really calling spiritually upon where I wanted to find alignment and where I could be purposeful and what I felt was possibly impactful, because I know that our president watches Fox News Channel, and I knew there was a large chance that he might, or someone close to him, hear my cry. And that's what I felt it was. It was a cry and a plea to our president to do what I felt was really important work in that moment. And I felt it came up short, woefully so, dangerously so, and I was calling upon him to remedy that. So I knew that there would be consequences, financial and personal and otherwise, and I was prepared to deal with those in a bold way.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really great point, and something that's like glossed over, especially when talking about Ms. Hill's comments. One of the things she said was, I think it was the epitome of white privilege is pretending that white supremacy isn't a threat. Well, it's a threat to me. At what point does someone turn from a journalist to a person that is under threat? Are we meant as journalists to simply pretend that we have no opinions when our lives are in danger, or we perceive that to be the truth?
So I've been talking about this a lot, especially I think it's kind of come to a head in the last few years. Even prior to this election cycle, I think this really took it to a new level. But I think we've been grappling as I call it media industry, right? That has different components. I think journalism in the traditional sense, where the expectation is objectivity and a separation of opinion and just straight fact. And that's morphed, I think, into, like I said, I call it media. I don't call myself a journalist, for instance. I call myself a broadcaster, because I work in spaces of talk radio where it's driven by informed opinion. That's an important word to put out there, informed opinion, because I spend a lot of time reading into the news cycle and coming upon my expertise as an attorney. Everybody that does what I do necessarily do that, but that's the privilege that I embark upon. So I think there are journalists, I think there are broadcasters, I think there are opinion-based hosts, and I think that distinction is important. But I think when we talk about millennials, Carrie, I don't know that those distinctions are being made. I think that people just see what's on TV or what's on a mobile device or what's even on radio or in print, and it's taken as the gospel. And so my advice to everyone is just consider the source, and I say that in a positive way. Consider the background of who you're listening to, who you're gathering information from, and who you're ultimately forming opinion around.
Excellent. We got a viewer comment here.
Sure.
Zach says, agree or disagree, speaking her mind like that on Fox took a spine of steel. No other way to put it.
Thank you.
Totally agree.
Thank you very much. That means a lot.
That's amazing that you did that.
Yeah. Well, you know what? And it's very kind. And one of the questions during our virtual signing that Carrie and I did was, what's the most special gift you've received recently? And it's from my love. And he gave me this scarf that says on it, courage. And that really was moving because I didn't really think of it that way. I didn't really wake up and say, I'm going to put on my white hero hat and go save the day. It felt like the least I could do, frankly, on behalf of my fellow Americans and on behalf of my community as a woman of color and broader, just on behalf of my people in this country. I want us to heal. I want us to be able to coexist, and more than coexist, and tolerate. I don't really like those words, tolerate, and that just doesn't really feel like the American spirit. I want us to celebrate one another and to engage in, I think agreement's overrated. I think our growth comes from those spaces of, well, I see it differently, and let me know why you see it that way. And I think we've been there before historically. I think we can get there again, and I look forward to that. So I didn't feel particularly heroic. What I felt was in that moment, in that format, on that network, if I were to say anything less, y'all, I don't know why I would have been there. To me, that would have felt like a wasted opportunity to do something that really meant a lot to our country.
Well, and last night, President Trump doubled down on what he had said about Charlottesville and said there is, on both sides, again, some fault here in Charlottesville. I mean, so I agree with what he was saying the first day, where he was saying there was some fault on all sides, because there were protesters who were counter-protesters that showed up, and even the New York Times reported about this. They were showing up to beat people. They were showing up with sticks. They were very, very violent. But I think it's different from what he said later on about saying there are good people there to protest, to support Confederacy. But so how do you, like you're still a Fox, like how are you going to, as this continues, like what's your strategy as a pretty powerful woman?
Well, thank you. So this is, again, where I'm such a lawyer. So there's this term that we use a lot in the law called red herrings. And red herrings are like when you're looking at a fact pattern and you just kind of laid out, so he said this and then he said this, so that's like a fact pattern, right? You got to drown out all the noise and you got to focus on what we call issue spotting, okay? So the issue is that a young lady lost her life in Charlottesville. And I think a lot of people have forgotten that. A young lady lost her life because of one individual who self-identified as a white supremacist. There's really no more analysis around that. That's the issue, as far as I'm concerned. Now, we can have a conversation around the protests and the counter-protests and all of that and how it's handled and the police response and the failures of that. And there's many, many things we can talk about. But what I was addressing in that docket was I was calling upon the president for a swift, direct, and severe condemnation of that issue. The fact that this young, beautiful, warm, smart, spirit-filled woman is no longer with us. Her parents lost their daughter because of the actions of a self-identified white supremacist. And I think if that issue had been properly focused on and addressed, it really could have been a powerful moment.
Mm-hmm. We got a viewer for you, a question. Gary Gaiji? Hey, Gary. Gary says, Eboni, what are your plans for the future?
Oh, Gary, so many. So obviously, really excited to show the world Pretty Powerful. It's it's my labor of love. It's really my love letter to women across this country specifically. And my next stop is in Los Angeles. Monday I will be having a book signing there, 7 to 9 at SO1 Books, and various cities across the country. And then we spoke about the Pretty Powerful Foundation, which I am actively working on getting my 501c3 paperwork done so that I can start the year 2018 with the mentorship and the educational and substantive development and appearance empowering workshops to marry, just like I'm talking about in the book, those two components to empower women to create narratives and control them for themselves, especially young women. So those are a couple things. And then, of course, I'm continuing with Curtis and Ebony, which I do here in New York, Monday through Friday, 12 to 3, with the famous Curtis Sliwa. And there's some exciting and really fun television things on the horizon.
Wow. So basically, you're going to be running a marathon.
Right, so basically I'll be at home twiddling my thumbs. And it'll be fun. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us,
Thank
Ebony
you, ladies.
Williams and
Thank you.
Sarah
Thank
Hill. It's
you.
been a wonderful conversation.
Awesome. Thank you.
And Carrie, take it
Yeah,
away.
no, so glad. Thank you for joining us.
Oh,
Miss
my pleasure.
Emily. And thank you all for joining us here on the ride for Bold TV. Make sure to join us back here next week on Friday for Bold TV at 10 a.m. and also Tuesdays with David Grasso, 9 a.m. for Bold Business. As always, we're so glad to have you here. Make sure to share the show with your friends and have a great weekend.